All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, depending on where you are. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, or to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. So we will. We'll start here with Chicago Slingshot. Says I get the first part of the Shaolin series. I hit 150 balls left into out with closed face, but I'm still unclear about how to take the same shot shape and move it over so that I am hitting right, turning the ball back left. I understand the concept, but I just don't know how to perform it. Yeah, so if you're unable to get the ball to start to the right and curve to the left, you need to go to the on the drill number 2 and do the plan B, which is to use an obstacle, right? So Clay uses an impact bag, but you can just use anything. Like this is a box right here. Put the box behind and to the right of your ball. So I got my ball here. I'm going to put my box down behind. I think Clay says it's two grip lengths behind the ball, right? And then and with the edge of it directly in line with the ball. So if I come over the top, I'm going to hit that box. So this is going to force my path to work from the inside. So that way I get the ball to start to the right and work to the left. And I would just start out with some shorter and slower swings if you're unable to do it in a full speed swing, and then build up to longer and faster swings. So Joe M says, "Hi Q. A couple of weeks ago, my wife and I had the privilege of taking a lesson with Robin, and it was great. We are wondering if at the top of the backswing, should your hands be close to your chest or away from your chest? Away from your chest. I would try to get your hands as far away from your chest as you can. Nice. You have some nice width here. We don't want to have the hands. We don't want to be like this at the top of the swing. This is not going to be a very powerful position. This is where we want to be. When you look at the best players in the world, you'll see they'll have those hands usually pretty wide. Now, if you have a little bit of bend in your lead arm, honestly, that's totally fine. We just don't want it to be excessive, right? So excessive would get the hands too close. You see, if you look at my swing on video, it's kind of like this. I have a little bit of bend in my arm. It's totally fine. Goes on to say, if possible, would you please demonstrate that angle as we want to be sure? Thank you kindly. Please keep it. So what I would try to feel like is just that your arms are long at the top. That lead arm, especially that trail arm, is going to fold a little bit, generally around 90 degrees, and that lead arm is going to be relatively straight. You don't necessarily need to lock it out. I would try to feel like it's athletically straight, meaning, if I were to throw a ball, right, I'm not locking my arm in a position, right? I'm letting my arm kind of be loose. So that's what I kind of want to feel here. I want to feel like my lead arm is athletically straight. I'm not like locking it out, hyperextending it necessarily. Because if you do that, that can add some tension to your arms, and that makes it harder to get that good whip through the ball. So I would just try to feel like you have some good, your hands are far apart from your body, but we don't necessarily need to lock them out like that. So JR says, is the beginning of the downswing the same for both driver and iron? Yeah, both start with pressure in the lead foot. Yeah. That's typically what I use as the beginner of the downswing, is to get that pressure going in that lead foot. Once we get there, we push in. Now with the driver, you may be more aggressive with that pressure, right? More pressure to get more speed, but the beginning of the downswing is going to be the same. Now you may have a little bit more lateral movement with an iron, right? So with an iron, I may get more lateral movement into my lead side to start the downswing. With a driver, I may get a little less lateral movement because I'm trying to stay behind the ball a little bit more, but it's really pretty much the same. Dan A says, low index, wondering if you would share your thoughts on advanced bunker shots, opening the face, ball position, amount of coil, distance to hit behind the ball, ball position using different clubs. So really what I would recommend doing is to really get advanced in the bunker. So there's a lot to unpack here. So to get advanced in the bunkers, you just have to go and get in the bunkers and learn by doing. Hit different distances from the ball, open up the face less, open up the face more. You know, you got to play around so that way you can understand what's happening. But until you kind of master the kind of the standard bunker shot, which I'll go over, I wouldn't really mess with any of that. And then once you get to where you can control where you're hitting the ground, how open the face is, and things like that, then you can play around with, okay, if I hit a little bit closer, I can get a little bit more spin, right? That sort of thing. You can work on that, but until then, I would kind of stick to the basics. So the basics are wide stance. Part of the reason why we want to have a wide stance is for stability. Sand is not a very stable, it's not extremely stable. So having a wider stance allows you to be a little bit more stable. It also allows you to get your hands a little bit lower, which can help you to engage the bounce a little bit more and get the face not to point as much to the right, because we're opening up the face so much. That makes the face point to the right. But if we get the handle lower, that makes the face point more to the left, right? So just to kind of show you, if I put my angle finder on here, my face tracker, or whatever you want to call it. So let's say I set up this club, it's perfectly square, right? If I lower the handle, see how that points it to the left? If I open the face, see how that points it to the right? So if I open the face and then lower the handle, you can see how that gets it to point straight. So if I get wider, if I'm narrow with my stance, my handle is going to be higher. If I'm wider with my stance, my handle is going to get lower. So that can help you to get, get the face a little bit more square to where your feet are pointing if you get lower. That's why when you look at tour players, sometimes you'll notice that their feet are basically aligned at the pin, right? The reason is because they're getting that handle low, right? And that lowering of the handle with the wide open face, that kind of squares up the face, right? So wide stance. The way I would think of it is you're going to be hitting the sand basically in the middle of your stance. So I place the ball, if the middle of my stance is right here, if I want to hit the sand, about 6 inches behind the ball, I'll set up with the ball about right in this area, right? So I'm going to set up here. I'm going to have a wide open club face, right? I want to feel like that club face is pointing up toward the sky, right? And a big key here with bunker shots, and this is probably the number one thing that people miss. I actually did a bunker lesson today, and this was the exact same. This was kind of the major issue that they had, is that you have to swing this with some speed, right? And I understand the hesitation to do that because it's not a long shot, right? What's your average bunker shot? 15 yards, greenside bunker shot. So it feels crazy to swing so hard for such a short shot. But the reason we need to is because we're hitting the sand, right? We're hitting the sand, and then the sand's propelling the ball out, right? So we need to, especially if we're doing this this more there's bigger margin for error shot, because as long as you swing hard with the shot, you're going to be good to go. So open face, wide stance, handle low. We're going to have to swing with some speed. Another way to think about it, Clay actually tested this. He tested what his club head speed was for a greenside bunker shot. And I think he measured it at like 80 miles an hour or something like that. And then he measured his club head speed when he's just hitting like a normal full swing shot with that same club. So with the lob wedge, for a full swing shot, he was swinging basically the same speed as he was for a 15-yard bunker shot, right? So you're going to need to do the same thing, right? So I would try to swing at full speed to see how far you're hitting the shots, because that way you can see what the cap is, right? And then you'll know, okay, if I need to hit it farther, I just need to use more club, right? Because I can use this exact same technique for a 4-iron, to be honest. right? Now the ball will go a lot farther because there's a lot less loft on a 4-iron, but it's not uncommon to have where you hit your lob wedge for this range of bunker shots. And then if you have a longer greenside bunker shot, you might use, a 54 or 56 degree wedge, and then you might use a 50-degree wedge, right? For those. So I would kind of see how far you hit it. So for me, my max, like the absolute max I could hit my 58-degree wedge out of a bunker would be, unless I'm doing like a spinny one where I'm catching more ball, but like my standard, hit 4 to 6 inches behind the ball, that's going to go about 20 yards, right? So if I want to hit it farther than that, I need to use my 54-degree, right? If I want to hit it farther than 30 yards, I need to use my 50-degree. If I want to hit it farther than 40 yards, I need to use a pitching wedge, right? So that's kind of the mantra that you want to have with it. So wide open face, wide stance. You're going to hit the sand in the middle of your stance, and then swing hard. If you do that and you keep that loft on the face, right? Meaning when we come through, what I would recommend doing is not trying to kind of roll your hands over and get that face closed. Keep that face wide open, right? So the release is going to be a little bit different. So generally, for an iron shot, if I was trying to, really nicely compress an iron shot, I would shift my weight to my right, then shift my weight to my left, get a good full turn. I'd get some lag. I would have some shaft lean at contact. I would have my hands in front. I release the club out in front. I let my arms kind of roll over, let that face kind of turn over naturally, right? For a bunker shot, I'm going to keep my weight forward, right? I'm going to have my weight forward. I'm going to try to keep it forward, right? And I'm actually going to try to release this club and get that face to be pointing toward me, right? Now, I don't literally want to come in like this, right? But if you're someone who naturally gets a lot of shaft lean, you may want to feel this. Now, if you're someone who already kind of comes in and flips, you probably don't need to feel much different. I would just try to feel like you're keeping that loft on there. So what I mean by that is when you come through, don't let that face turn over because that's going to close it. I would try to feel like that club face is always pointing back at you. So if I do that in slow motion, right, I take my big turn. So I got my body, got my wide stance here. I got my hands low. I got my big swing that I'm taking, and I'm coming in. I'm letting this club, and then let this club fly underneath the sand, and then I'm going to feel like I have that club face pointing back toward me. So instead of that, I'm going to feel like my trail hand doesn't get over top of the club. It stays underneath it as I come through. So my trail hand stays underneath the club, and that's going to allow me to keep the loft on there. And that's going to allow the ball to get up in the air a little bit better. That's really it. And then once you get to where you can do that standard technique, then I play around with how close you're hitting to the ball, right? I play around with lower handle, right? I would play around with trying to get it to go higher, right? So getting that handle really low, getting that face wide open, really feeling like you're cutting the legs out under it, trying to feel like it goes super high. And then I would actually try some low ones, right? Try the face not quite as open, body forward, and more hitting into the sand, right? And kind of like the chunk and run kind of shot and letting it run out, right? I would play around with those kinds of shots once you got the standard technique down. All right, so John C says, "Hi Q, working on creating lag, keeping my wrist soft. But the trouble is I'm having is if I'm loose my wrist, the grip tends to loosen. Any suggestions for keeping my grip constant with my wrists being softer? I don't have good feeling or dexterity in my hands." Yeah, you just have to practice it. I would work through that lag progression drill. In the top speed lag system. It's in level 1. Work through that. Put in a lot of reps with that. That's how you're going to develop that right feel with that. So yeah, we want to be able to, what I feel like is I have soft wrists, not necessarily soft hands, right? I have soft wrists. So I'm holding on to this club, but I'm letting that weight of the club, create that loft, right? So that's what I would kind of feel like as you're doing that lag progression drill from the top speed lag system, the course. It's a really good one to help with that, but you got to put in the reps with it. Unfortunately, there isn't anything I'm going to be able to tell you that's just going to make you get it right. You just have to put in the reps and do it every day. Get to where it's second nature, and then you'll get better at it. Anything that I've ever changed in my swing, right, that needed to be changed, but it was like a bad habit. So let's say that you've always had a bad habit of, kind of being like the Tin Man with the, with the wrists and all that stuff, and too tight with the grip. We want to loosen the grip to a certain extent, but we need to be able to hold on to the club still, right? So, you got to work through it first. So like anything that I've ever done. So for example, I used to have an early release. I used to come into contact and I looked like this. I maybe had 2 degrees of shaft length. My shaft was almost straight up and down at impact. And, the first time I ever did something like a stick drill, right? So this is a drill where you take an alignment stick and you put it down the shaft like that. The first time I ever did something like this, I just whacked myself in the side. It was like I couldn't do it in the beginning. But then I would kind of slow down and kind of learn how I need to do it. And then I'm able to, then I work up to faster and faster and faster. And now like I could take full speed, like a very fast swing, and this comes nowhere near touching me, right? And that's just because I put in the reps, I put in the time to make it second nature. So unfortunately, there's no substitution for hard work. You just gotta go in there and do the drills to get to that 20-minute shallowing or 20-minute distance fix. I'm saying the wrong thing. 20-minute. It's not 20-minute anything. That's why I keep messing up. It's the lag course. So to get to that course, you can click the instruction tab and then click the top speed golf system. Then you can go to the lag course from there. If anybody else is struggling with the lag, I recommend you start there. So Mike B says, I've been watching Clay's Posture Fix course. It struck me that it promotes being bent forward more than I thought and maintaining side bend when hitting the ball. Watching the Masters, I noticed most of the pro golfers do this. This is a major revelation for me and can't wait to try this upcoming season. So I haven't watched all of it, but I know he does one drill where he has you choke up on the club a ton, and that gets you way down here, right? So I would say that's just a drill, right, to help you to basically give you the sense of your body being much closer to your chest, being much closer to the ball, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean we want you to start out, set up like this, right? I don't want you setting up like this. I want you to be nice and tall within your setup, because if you're tall in your setup, that makes it easier for you to go down in the downswing. And also you're not going to tend to go up, because if you're very bent over in your setup, you're going to tend to stand up in your backswing, right? So I like to see golfers taller, so that way they can kind of stay tall as they go up to the top, and then they can move down in the downswing. That's generally what I like to say, and that's what you see with most of the best players. But thanks for sharing, Mike. I just wanted to clear that up in case that's kind of what it kind of sounded like, that maybe that's what you were thinking, that we want you to be more bent over in the address position, but that's really just one of those drills. It's not really, we want you to feel more bent over at impact for sure. Mike H says, struggling with early extension. Very happy to see the new Posture Fix series. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch all of it. I'm going to this week though, for sure. But yeah, hopefully it's awesome. I mean, typically let's talk about early extension a little bit real quick. I don't know if Clay dives into this, but typically with early extension, most golfers start to early extend because they're reacting to the club and or the club face orientation, right? So what does that actually mean? Well, let's talk about the club orientation. What I'm talking about is the club, how the club is coming down, how you're managing the sweet spot as it's coming down, right? So are you shallowing out the club, or are you coming down steep? Well, if you're coming down steep, that can lead to early extension. the reason, this is one of the most common causes of early extension or root causes. Um, the reason is that if I start down steep, meaning my club is more straight up and down, right? So my club is kind of going like this. It's working in kind of that direction, right? And I can, there's lots of different ways you can come down steep. You can come down steep where maybe your club is, pointing. I had this one recently where somebody was telling me, well, my butt end of the club is pointed outside the ball, so I'm shallow. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're shallow, right? Because to think about it in an extreme sense, if I bring my hands way out like this, which often golfers do, right? Well, I can get that butt into the club to point outside the golf ball, but that I'm very steep right here. I'm going to come way over the top, right? So I don't recommend using that as an indication of coming down shallow. Now, I will say that most of the best players are going to have that butt into the club pointing outside the ball, but they also are going to have their hands. Their hands are typically going to be more here, not out here, right? So we have to be a little bit careful with where the butt end is pointing as an indication of shallowing out the club. But anyway, if we're steep coming down, a lot of times what will happen is people will early extend is a way to shallow out the club, right? So coming up out of my posture, early extending, you can see if I'm like this and I stay in my posture, I go more, I bend over more, look what happens to the club. If I come out of my posture, I stand up, look what happens to the club, it shallows out, right? So standing up, that is a way, early extension, that's a way to shallow out the club. So if I start down steep, or my hands are very steep, or something like that, I may be standing up as a way to shallow out the club. Not always, right? But that is a common cause of coming down steep. So if we don't fix that, right, then you don't really have any incentive to shallow out the club. And a lot of times people they're trying to come up with a solution to whatever their problem is, right? So if I don't come out of my posture and I don't early extend to get rid of if I'm like this and I stay in my posture, well, look what happens. I'm going to come down way over the top. And that's what bad golfers do. High handicap golfers are going to tend to come over the top and steep on the ball. So if you start down steep, you can alleviate that by coming up out of your posture, early extending, and now the club is shallow. Now I can hit functional shots. I will tell you this. I will much, much rather have the golfer that stands up, early extends, doesn't stay in their posture, but shallows out the club late than the golfer that maybe stays in their posture, but they come down steep and over the top. Because the golfer that shallows it out late, they're at least going to be able to hit good golf shots. They're not going to be as consistent as someone who stays in their posture and shallows out the club like a pro, right? Not typically, but they're going to be able to hit good shots. They're going to be able to hit functional golf shots, right? And what does it mean to hit a functional golf shot? It just means that I was able to make ball first contact, center face contact. I was able to get my club coming down on a relatively neutral path down to the ball with a relatively square club face, right? That's going to give me a functional shot. Non-functional shots are if we hit the ground before the ball, right? If I hit the ball way off the toe, way off the heel. I swing over the top, too much in to out, too much out to in. My club face is too open, too close. Those are what create non-functional shots. So a lot of times that standing up, that early extension, that is a mechanism. It's a solution to the starting down steep problem, which produces a functional shot, right? But it's going to typically be less consistent because you're going to tend to early release. You're going to tend to have less control over what you're doing and things like that. So that's why you don't see the best players in the world typically doing it. And the ones that there are some tour players or some really high up players that early extend, but they do it minimally. It's not like a full on. There's no tour players that look like this at Impact where their hips are completely tucked. There's some tour players that are a little bit, but not a ton. Jimmy Walker comes to mind. Jack Nicklaus early extended a little bit. So you can play great golf doing that. The other reason is because the club face is open, right? So like I said, a lot of what we do in the golf swing or the way that we move in the golf swing is a reaction to where the center of mass of the club is. So that's what the steepness If my center of mass is going down steep, I'm going to tend to stand up, shallow it out. If it's coming down shallow, I at least am incentivized to stay in my posture. It doesn't mean I'm going to. It just means I'm incentivized to do so. And then the other thing is the open club face. So if my club face is open, what I'll tend to do to get that club face closed is I'll tend to release it. And that's the next thing we need to understand, is that releasing the club, that is a way to close the club face, right? So if I have this face open, I can release it to square it up. So if I'm coming down, this face is open, I got to release it to square it up. Well, if I release it to square it up, what do I have to do? I have to stand up out of my posture. Because if I release it early and I don't stand up, well, what's going to happen is I'm just going to throw that club into the ground. So I have to stand up and come up out of my posture, early extend, to be able to get that, to be able to have room to release the club without it hitting the ground, right, too early. So those are usually the two biggest things. Sometimes it's physical limitation that leads to it, but those are kind of the main things. So Mike A says, my right hip doesn't turn properly, so I start coming out of posture in the backswing, and I get worse from there. So what I would recommend doing is flaring out your feet. A lot of times, I would really kind of need to see your swing to know for sure what's going on there, but a lot of times that's due to not being able to turn into your right hip as much. So if you flare out your feet, it makes it easier to turn into your right hip and not have to stand up out of it. So that's what I would be trying to do. I need to send you my swing, but I'm afraid. No reason to be afraid. Yeah, sign up for the online lessons. We can definitely, I don't share your swings with anybody, so it would just be between me and you. In the beginning, I do ask for permission to use the video, but you can certainly say no. It's totally up to you. I do make before and after videos sometimes with the people who say yes. So, and that just helps, to share what can be possible, when you do the online lessons, maybe encourage people to sign up for it. So, yeah. So, if you're interested in the online lessons, let me see here. Yeah. So at the moment, there's 2 spots available. So if you click the link above the video here, you should see a link there where you can sign up. Yeah, just follow that link and then you can sign up. Does angling the club toward your left hip help with ball first contact? It can. It doesn't mean it will, but it certainly can. So here's why. So when you have your hands more ahead at address, so as opposed to being like this, So when you have your hands more ahead, that does that at address, that does a couple things. One, it encourages a stronger grip, right? I think a big reason why a lot of people don't have that forward press or the club angling forward at address is because they use a weak grip, and it's not as comfortable to have a weak grip and have your hands like this. So it's much more comfortable for me to have a strong grip and have my hands ahead. So if I have a strong grip, I'm gonna be more likely to be able to get the face closed, right? If I'm more likely to get the face closed, it's easier for me to get my hands ahead at impact and release the club later. If I release the club later, then that can help me to not chunk the ball as much, right? Because if I'm here and I release it, I'm in the ground. If I'm here and I release it way later, I can swing over the top of the ball. Actually, I can hit the ground there, right? So that's really what it comes down to. So it can, but it doesn't mean an automatic, right? It's not automatic. It doesn't mean I'm going to put my hands ahead and I'm going to start making ball first contact. It can help, but it doesn't mean it necessarily will. But that would be the reason why it would. So Mike S says, I'm recovering from an injury, but we'll do once treatment is over. No problem. Yeah, no worries. All right, we got about 30 minutes left here if we got any more questions. If not, no worries. So Tom M says, hi Q, just wondering about how much extension you should strive for with your arms after impact. Doing that seems to put strain on the lower back. Maybe I'm just need some stretches to get into that position. Extension of what exactly? So extension of your arms? I mean, in the release, the arms are going to tend to be pretty straight, right? They're going to be pretty straight in the release. Then after that, after the release, your lead arm is going to tend to fold up, right? So now at when my arm is parallel here, my trail arm, my lead arm is going to be pretty folded up, right? And then when I come around to the full finish, I'm going to tend to have my right arm is going to tend to fold up as well. So really, the full extension of the arms, that's really only happening in the release. And after the release, the arms are going to fold up. So Gordon A says, describe the movement of the right shoulder during the downswing. Yeah, so with the right shoulder, really all it's really going to do is just going to move down, right? So I'm at the top, it's high. It's typically going to be retracted, meaning that my shoulder blade, my scapula is going to be moving toward my spine a little bit. So when I go up to the top, my right shoulder is going to go high and it's going to be retracted. As I come down, it's going to stay retracted. And then as I come down into impact, as that's rotating around, my right shoulder is going to rotate down and around. That shoulder is going to go back to a neutral position. And then when I release it, it's going to protract, meaning that my scapula is going to be moving away from my spine. So Mike H says, Q, have you or Clay tried lab putters? What are your thoughts about their no torque philosophy? I have not personally used a lab putter. I don't know if Clay has or not. But what we have to understand is that what makes a good putter, what makes someone a good putter? The ability to hit the ball on the right line at the right speed, the ability to read greens, and then the mental capacity, right? The mental capacity to feel like you're going to miss the mental capacity to feel like you're going to make every single putt, the ability to visualize every single putt, seeing it go in, and then having the understanding that at the same time you're going to miss a lot of putts, right? But you still have to have the mentality that you're going to make every single one. That's really what makes a good putter. So, I've seen the their little demonstration where they have the thing that holds that putter, steady. And I think that can definitely help you to hit the ball on the right line if you struggle with that. So yeah, if that's something that you struggle with, I could see how that helps. But for me, I feel like it would. I've seen the putters, and for me, it's too large. I can't make a good stroke with such a large putter, and also it does not suit my eye at all. So for me personally, I don't like the look of. It doesn't mean they're not good putters. This is just my personal for my game, right? You may love the look of the putter. You may say, "Yeah, I can line this up so easily. I love that it doesn't have the torque, thing going on. I love all that, but it doesn't. for me, I don't like those things, right? So it can help. I think it can help people, obviously, but it's not a putter that I would ever play, unless they made ones that weren't as large, and also because that's the problem with putters that are from a physics standpoint, which is what that putter is. Putters that are really good from like a physics standpoint are generally really large, right? And hard to kind of line up and don't suit the eye very well, right? Cure putters, right? I won't name names or anything, but there's been some golfers, some professional golfers that have used those cure putters. Those cure putters are very high MOI putters. If you're not familiar with what that is, MOI is moment of inertia. I'm guessing that's what the lab putters are, just high MOI putters, so that they don't want to twist and stuff like that. The weight is just balanced really well. So anyway, they tend to be very large, and this one pro used the putter and did really well with it. In fact, won a tournament with it or something like that. And then they took it back, and asked Cure if they could like make the putter smaller, and they're like, we can't make it any smaller. Then they said that they can't use it because they can't stand the way it looks, right? And if you hate your putter, it's hard to, you don't want to have that mental hurdle. So it's not that lab putters are bad putters. I think they're probably great putters. I imagine there's a lot of people that really like them, but they're not for me. I use a high MOI putter. I feel like it works great, and it suits my eye. But that's what you have to look at when you're looking at improving your putting. Putting is one of the most simple things to improve, because it's very easy to break down into what you need to do, right? Because it just comes down to those four things. It's hitting the ball on the right line at the right speed. So it's line, speed, read, mentality. That's really what it is. So if your green reading is great, right? You can look at that. If it stinks, you can look at that. Those are really what it comes down to. So when you're looking at buying a new putter, I would ask yourself, does this improve any of these four aspects? And I would test it, right? And if it doesn't, then you probably, unless you just want to spend some money and have a putter, right? But I wouldn't necessarily expect it to make you a better putter if it doesn't do that. All right, let's keep going. So Dana W says, I came in late to an office hours once where you were finishing saying something about every practice swing should be less than full effort. Don't believe I recall saying that, but can you repeat what you were saying or correct me if I misheard that? Yeah, I don't recall ever saying that, so I can't. And also, if you ever come to an office hours and all these office hours are archived. So if you ever come to an office hours and maybe you jump like Dana did, jumped in the middle of a explanation and you wanted to hear the rest of it, you can always go to the archived office hours and say that. I don't recall ever saying practice swings should be less than full effort. I don't recall ever saying that. I don't necessarily believe that. I mean, a practice swing can be full effort. I mean, generally when I take practice swings, it's usually just to stay loose or to gauge, a parameter that I'm trying to work on. So for example, to gauge where the ground is. So if I'm chipping, for example, I'll do practice swings typically where I'm chipping because I'm trying to gauge how far I want to bring this club back, like how hard I want to swing, right? Because that's going to largely determine how far this ball is going to go. And I'm also gauging where the ground is because I want to make sure that I'm hitting the ground, right? For most, obviously, if the ball is really sitting up on the grass, like kind of tee, I may not want to get into the ground. But for a typical normal lie chip shot, I want to make sure that I'm hitting the ground. So, so yeah, for that, if I'm, um, the other reason I would take a practice swing would be to stay loose, right? So let's say, it's a slow day out on the course. I might take a couple practice swings. If I had to wait like 5 minutes, I might take a couple practice swings to get the blood flowing again, and then before I hit my next shot. But yeah, I don't recall what the context was there. But if you remember what day it was that you jumped in on that, you can go to the archived office hours. Here's how you get to the archived office hours. You can click the instruction tab at the top, then go to office hours, then go to office hours highlights. And then on the bottom of the office hours highlights page, you'll see the archived office hours, and you can just go to whatever day that you jumped in late on, and you can see the whole context. All right, let's get going. Tom M says Colin Morikawa seems to have very fast body rotation through impact, and I'm wondering if that helps him generate such high swing speed. Seems to me most of the speed comes from the hands, and body speed and arm speed are minor contributors. Am I wrong? Most of the speed comes from the arms and the wrists. That's where most of the speed's going to come from. But yeah, body rotation is also helps to create speed. Also helps to turn the body, right? So if we're turning the body, letting the momentum all the way through, allows him to get his hands ahead more at impact. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, he definitely turns through the ball pretty quickly, but that's not where all of his power comes from. If you imagine this, imagine if you tied the club just to your waist, right? How hard would you be able to hit a ball? Not really that hard, right? Now imagine you held the club. It was only your arms were strapped down. You can only hit it with your wrists. Just this. I could actually get a lot more speed from just my wrist than my hips, right? Now imagine you're tied to a tree. Your body's tied to a tree, but you can use your arms and your wrists. Well, now I can generate, and I can probably generate 75 to 80% of my all my club head speed from that, right? So yeah, most of your club head speed is going to be coming from your arms and your wrists, but your body creates the momentum, and allows you to do other things as well. Allows you to control the club through contact better. Allows you to get your hands more ahead more easily because of the forces that are acting on the club. I can talk about that real quick. So imagine if I swing this club and I stop my arm really quick, what's going to happen? My club's going to race forward, right? My club's going to release. So that's the same thing. If I'm coming down and my body doesn't turn, my body stalls, I'm going to throw the club. That if you have a chicken wing, this is most likely why, because you throw your arms in front of your body, and the arms and everything keep going, right? So that's going to create a chicken wing. If I turn my body, right, I don't have a chicken wing. So that's that's a big part of it for sure. All right, so let's see here. We got about 15 minutes left. If we have any more questions, if not, no worries. Dan says, I clearly misheard. Thanks. You may not have misheard. I talk about a lot of stuff, and I could have very well been talking about that, and I just don't remember. But yeah, I don't recall exactly the whole thing there. So Tom M says, since we have some time, can you explain how to hit a high draw and a low fade? Thanks. Yeah. So any shot that you want to hit higher, you just have to have more loft, right? Um, and it's much easier to hit a high fade because to hit a fade, the club face has to be open to the path, and uh, when you open the face to the path, that adds loft, and that's why the ball goes higher, right? So if any shot I'm trying to hit high, whether it's a high fade or high straight shot, high whatever, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the ball slightly forward in my stance, like one ball forward in my stance. So if I normally play the ball about the middle of my stance, I'm going to go one ball forward to the middle of my stance. That's going to help the club release a little bit before it gets the ball. And I'm going to stand a little bit taller. I'm going to feel like the club releases a little bit sooner, right? So instead, maybe normal trajectory shot would be like right here, with the ball position a little bit more back, right, more in the middle of the stance, and then ball position a little bit more forward with a little bit more releasing, right, maybe a little less shaft, and that's going to allow the ball to go higher. Now, keep in mind, it's not going to go as far if you add more loft. Another thing that you can do is hit. So let's say I'm between clubs. Let's say I'm behind a tree and I have I got a tree in front of me. Let's say I got 160 yards, right? Well, what I can do is I can take for 160 yards, if I need to hit it high, what I can do is I can take depending on how high I need to hit it. So 160 yards would be like a 9-iron. For me, that's like a 9-iron. So, if I need to hit it really high, I might take I don't think I could hit a pitching wedge quite that far. If I try to crush a pitching wedge, I would look and see how far you hit shots. So one thing I would recommend is don't hit shots on the course that you don't practice, right? Because that's how you can get yourself into trouble when you try to do something that you've never ever practiced before. So one thing that I would look to see is when you go to the range and practice this, so that way you're good at it if you're in the situation, is to see how far you can hit like a pitching wedge. Like if you were to swing hard at a pitching wedge, basically you're giving it a little extra. You probably add 5 miles an hour to it. How far does that go? Because if that's one way you can hit it higher. Because if you hit a ball at the same launch angle, but you hit it with more speed, it will go higher. Because you're giving the ball more energy to climb up in the air. So that'd be one way to hit it higher is with one more speed. The other way to hit it higher is with more loft, right? And if you're hitting a high fade, you're already hitting a fade, right? Or excuse me, if you're hitting a draw, If you're hitting a draw, right, you're not gonna be able to fade it if you want to hit a draw. So you're gonna have to add more loft to it. So ball position a little bit more forward, a little bit more of a release, maybe a little bit more club head speed, a little bit more of a speed. I would practice these things and play around with them to see what kind of trajectories you can get. Now with a low fade, I got to do just the opposite, right? If I'm trying to drive the ball in really low, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the one ball back in my stance. I'm going to really feel like I drive my hands forward, get my hands more forward, and release the club later, right? And if I'm hitting a fade, right, I have to understand that in order to hit a fade, I'm opening the face to the path. So it's not going to go as low as a low draw would, right? But if I'm going to hit it low, I got to get my hands more forward. So I need to swing left of my target with the face open to my path, get my hands more forward. That's going to allow me to hit it lower. I will say the low fade is the toughest shot for most people, right? Because of those reasons. Well, one, people already struggle to hit the ball low to begin with. Most people release the club early. So, you have to get extra shaft lean basically to hit it lower with a fade. So it's a tougher shot for most. What I would actually recommend doing that would be like probably an easier way would be to use a lower lofted club and take a shorter swing. So maybe instead, let's say you got a 160-yard shot. For me, that's a 9 iron. I can hit my 9 iron 165. That's with a draw. With a fade, it would probably be around that 160 area, right? Go a little bit shorter because I'm adding a little bit loft, right? Um, you know, if I wanted to hit a big fade on it, right, and I really need to get it lower than what my 9 iron trajectory is, it's actually would be a lot easier to just take like a 6 iron, or I'm just maybe a 7 iron, depending on how low and how far you need to hit it. So it's 160 yards. I would take a 6 iron and I'll just choke up on the 6 iron, and I'm going to take a 3/4 swing. I'm just going to hit a fade like I normally would, right? I'm just going to open my feet a little bit to my target. I'm going to have my face a little bit open. I'm going to hold that face through contact, and that's going to get that ball to turn from left to right. It's going to be low because I'm using a lower lofted club. That's going to be a lot easier, right? So you just have to play around with it. That's what I recommend doing, but understand what needs to happen, right? What needs to happen is I need to have hit it higher. I either need more speed, or I need to have more loft on the club. I can get more loft by releasing it a little bit earlier. I can get more loft by using a higher lofted club, but I need to be able to hit a certain distance as well. I can get more loft by giving the ball more energy to keep going up in the air, right? So you got to play around with it to figure out how far you can hit certain shots. If I want to hit it low, I need to de-loft it, right? I need to get less loft. So you can use a less lofted club. You can de-loft the club and get your hands more in front, right? Those are ways that you can hit it low. And then hitting a draw at a fade is just the same, right? Drawing the ball, I need to have my path into out. I need to have my face close to that path to get the ball to draw, right? For a fade, I need to have my path out to in. I need to have my face open to that path to get it to fade. So how I hit a draw, I'm a natural drawer of the ball. So my alignment is dead straight with the target. I swing into out, shallow it out relative to my toe line, which is along the target line. I get my face close to that path, the ball turns over, right? So naturally, I'm swinging from the inside. The face turns over. I get that draw. For me to hit a fade, I align my body more to the left, so that way I can more easily get my path working to the left. I don't swing over the top. I still shallow out the club the same way as I was before. I just align my body to the left, so that way my path is left relative to the target. Instead of rolling my hands over, right, what I do for the fade is I hold my face. I hold that face open. I don't let the face naturally roll over. I hold that face open, and I get the ball to fade back. That's the way that I do it. There's lots of ways to do it, but that's the way that I do it. I push my hands ahead. I hold that face open. That gets that fade on there. I like to do it this way because pushing my hands ahead also de-lofts it. So I usually don't lose much distance on my fades whenever I hit them, because because I'm counteracting the loft being added by the fading open of the club face. I'm counteracting that with more shaft length. So that's really what a power fade is. A power fade is a fade that you really don't lose any distance on compared to your draw, because you're counteracting the loft that's added by getting more shaft length. Yes, easier said than done for sure. It's just, yeah, a lot, listen, everybody, I can sit here and talk about how to do things, but it really doesn't mean anything. You have to go out and do it. If you look at anyone, I'm sure all of us have buddies or know someone who's good, like who's a scratch or better. Talk to any scratch or better golfer. At some time in their life, it may not be right now, but at some time in their life, they work their tail off. They put in the reps, and I don't do it now. Neither does Clay, right? But when we were, I know when I was in high school, my summers consisted of just playing golf every day. And sometimes I'd walk 54 holes. I get up, I pick up the range, I go play 50, walk 54 holes, which I don't even know how I did that. It wasn't a tough walk, the course, but I probably couldn't walk 18 holes on that course right now. I couldn't imagine walking 18 holes right now. I haven't done that in a long time. I could walk 9 holes, but yeah, walking 18 holes would be tough for me. I'd definitely be sore and would be fatigued at the end for sure. I'm just out of shape for it. But used to walk 54 holes. So, my course didn't have a range, or didn't have a range for some of that time. It did later, but I couldn't really afford the range, and we were members, and I got to play for free for being a member. So I chose to play, and I play 54 holes, practice on our practice putting green. I would do that all day. And that's how I went from shooting. I could barely break 50, and I got to where I was shooting in the 40s all the time. And then I got to where I was shooting in the 30s by the time I got to high school. So I think I broke 40 for the first time right before high school started. For 9 holes. So, but I put in the time, I put in the work, I put in the effort. And even in college, when I was working, my golf swing really wasn't very good in college, but I worked my tail off. I hit tons of balls. I practiced and played a ton. That was what a lot of my free time went to. And, that's the only reason why I was able to keep up for the most part. So that's really what it comes down to. I wish there was some secret I could tell you that's just going to make, everything go, be perfect and be consistent and all that stuff. But the only way you really ever get there is by putting in the work. And, and if you do it intelligently by, maybe working on making sure you're working on the right things, right? Like the top speed golf system, stuff like that. You get a lot more out of your hard work. But any way you slice it, it just comes down to you got to put in the reps for sure. All right, I'm going to jump off here. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to y'all next time.